Enamórate con la venta de San Valentín de JCPenney y ahorra hasta 70% en joyería fina con el cupón. Endulza el ambiente con hasta 50% en esenciales para el hogar. Además, usa el cupón en la app de JCPenney y ahorra aún más. Déjate flechar por estos ahorros y celebra el Día del Amor y la Amistad por todo lo alto. JCPenney, vale la pena. Ofertas válidas hasta el 14 de febrero en selección de estilos. Aplican exclusiones. Detalles en la tienda jcp.com.
They say there's no good news.
There's no good news.
Before we get into the reasons for why we're here today, I would just like to issue this disclaimer that thoughts, opinions, and views contained in this show are not those of me, Shay Anai, or No Good Writer. I am merely the messenger. I merely say what I am told. All material has been conceived and approved by my co-host and the executive producer of this show, aka the K9 who prefers to remain anonymous. So with that in mind, all complaints, criticisms, and definitely lawsuits should be directed towards her. Cynthia Richey is making a name for herself as the American blogger claiming rape in Pakistan. And not only is she claiming she was raped, she's claiming the rapist is a former political leader. As you can imagine, not everyone is applauding that she came forth, and there are those who aren't happy about the publicity that she's attracting. Plus, some question her motives.
Some do question, and there are some concerns that it's almost reasonable to assume that you are courting a scandal here.
I don't know that I'm courting anything. The truth is that it is my truth.
Cynthia Richey's truth. Let's get into that. So who is Cynthia Richey? Well, she's a freelance director, producer, and writer. She calls Pakistan her second home, and she's been living there for years, like over a decade. So in June, she went public with claims that former Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Gilani sexually harassed her, and she alleges that former Interior Minister Rahim Malik raped her in 2011. Now, this is when the Pakistan People's Party, also known as the PPP, was in power. Both of these men not only belong to the PPP, but they're still popular figures, and both of them deny the allegations. But Richey says she has proof. That clip you heard earlier was a Voice of America interview that Richey did with Iram Abbasi, and in it, she said that her bundle of evidence includes things like messages and screenshots. But regardless, one of the questions she's going to have to face in a situation like this is why she didn't report the rape back then. During the Voice of America interview, she gave some explanation for why she didn't create more commotion at that time like she is now. Listen to what she said.
When this happened to me, I, of course, was not going to tell my mother. I did not want my family to know. I did not want them to worry further. And on top of that, I had already met a number of really good people here in Pakistan that genuinely believed that an improved U.S.-Pakistan relationship should take place and should manifest. And I felt that my role here was to help be a better advocate as an American for Pakistan.
She also addressed the issue on Facebook, She said she did eventually report the rape to the U.S. Embassy and to officials in Washington, and it came down to one word: politics. The USG failed me due to politics, she said. And now it seems Pakistan's government is failing her, at least for now, because the Islamabad police dismissed her rape claims as baseless and wouldn't even register her case. So she took the matter to the court system. But Gulf News said this week the court dismissed her petition to file a rape case. But apparently, there are a lot of Pakistanis who don't know who they're fucking with, okay? Because Richie insists that this issue will be addressed. So hold on. I said this happened in 2011, right? So you may be thinking, well, okay, why did this become a pressing matter now? Well, that depends on who you ask. Shortly before Richie came out with these allegations, she made some comments on social media, on Twitter, including some comments about Benazir Bhutto, which is a former prime minister in Pakistan. And let's just say those comments weren't embraced by everyone. So the PPP filed a complaint against her with the Federal Investigation Agency, with the Cyber Crime Wing, alleging defamation on her part. So some, like Gulf News, point to the timing of that. It was only weeks before Richie made her allegations that the PPP filed this complaint. There are also some who believe Richie is working with the ISPR, and that's like the PR wing for the Pakistan Armed Forces. They also think she's working with the KP government, which is the government for one of the 4 provinces in Pakistan. So there's this perception that there are people putting her up to making these claims against Malik and the PPP for political reasons. But she attempted to shut that down in a Facebook video. Here is what she has to say.
Absolutely not. These claims are my own, and I stand by them. End of story. Bastiga.
Richie says she's been wanting to go public for a long time, and she's been working on memoirs that will tell her story. But not only does she now have a larger platform where she believes that her story can gain more traction, what really did it was that someone made the bad decision of getting her family involved. And she doesn't play that.
She's angry.
According to her, someone posing as like a long-lost sibling from her father's first marriage started reaching out to her family members in the U.S. So her sisters, thinking that this person, was likely one of their family members, released a lot of what she calls personal family information. And that information was eventually released via PPP and PTM's media accounts.
It's one thing to abuse me, it's one thing to call me names, but when someone attacks my family is when it becomes personal for me.
You're in trouble.
And just so you know, PTM is a social movement that's supposed to be about improving rights in Pakistan. Now, PPP is also supposed to be like a progressive party about women's rights, which is one of the things that Richie says is very ironic, because both of these groups, they portray themselves as one thing to the world, but they're really something very different in Pakistan. That's what she said. So now they got her family involved, and she is heated. So now these allegations are out there and the fight is on. It's gotten dirty, and it could get a lot dirtier. Because Richie swears she's going to put a flame to these people. Richie claims the PPP has harassed her. They've been trying to intimidate her. She says they've threatened her. They've defamed her. She says she even has diplomats who are willing to go on record saying that they have heard members of the PPP party calling her, threatening to rape her and harm her family. And at one point, they told her that they have her father, they were holding her father hostage, but apparently they didn't know that he was already dead. And the drama has been escalating. So after Richie made the allegations against Malik, Malik filed a defamation lawsuit against her for about $297,000, which has now been dismissed. But she claims that she's still in and out of court like 2 or 3 times a week with different legal issues that the PPP is bringing against her. And she claims that most of it's games, because according to her, a lot of times the PPP representatives who file these claims don't even show up, or they do something that drags the matter on to prevent it from being resolved. On top of what she calls frivolous, persistent, and malicious prosecution for random things, the PPP is also trying to have her deported. They claim that her business visa ran out in March, and she has no grounds to have it renewed. She claims she already got it renewed and it's good until the end of August. Now, there's a court date set for this matter at sometime in September. But mind you, as I said, her visa expires at the end of August.
The Ministry of Interior keeps sending representatives who either don't have adequate knowledge of my case or who are pretending to not have adequate knowledge of my case, and or communicate in a manner that is inadequately describing what my role has been in Pakistan.
And the reason for that is because the government is also playing games with this whole visa deportation case, according to Richie. On top of all of this, she's been accused of anti-state activity. She's been accused of being a triple agent. She gets death threats. She gets rape threats. And there's growing scrutiny about how Richie is working on the projects that she's working on and how she gets access to the things that she does. And that's not just coming from the people that she's fighting with in the PPP. At least one judge has posed the question. Members of the public want to know. And it seems to be a topic among media professionals too. Listen to what Iram Abbasi asks her.
The kind of access you have, I don't have it. A lot of journalists, and I'm a Pakistani, a lot of international journalists don't have that access. How did you manage to get that access?
Have you tried to gain that access?
Absolutely.
Have you tried to tell the story of PTM?
Absolutely.
Then
I want to understand that because you've been seen in power centers and you've been posting pictures about powerful people in Pakistan that you've been meeting with, you've been, in contact with. And obviously for work and to be able to have access to those areas, you have to do that. I'm just curious as a journalist to find out, how did you manage to get access?
I think, there's a good side and an upside. I think one of the first questions that I was asked years ago was, who are you? There was a mentality because I wasn't affiliated with BBC or CNN or that I was nobody. And I felt that was sort of a very elitist mentality. And I said, look, I'm someone that's interested in telling an objective story. I'm not interested in pushing propaganda. I'm not interested in pushing Pakistan's propaganda. I'm not interested in pushing America's propaganda. I'm interested in trying to understand the people of this country and telling their story.
That is just amazing. That is beyond impressive. I mean, I know that's not exactly what we're talking about, but her access, her ability, her connections, that is one of the things that have come into focus since this case erupted. And it is just phenomenal that this American goes to Pakistan with like basically nothing to back her up, and she's asking for access to this and asking questions about that and digging into this, that, and the other, and people are asking her to justify why she needs access to this information, and she just tells them, because I'm here to tell an objective story. That is impressive. So you remember that I told you that people believe she's working for ISPR and the KP government. Here's what she said that people need to understand about that.
That the Ministry of Interior said that I was working with ISPR and KP government. That is incorrect. Working with, I was never an employee. I was never paid. I was never a paid employee. I was never working with in the sense that I was collaborating with. Let me be very, very clear. When we say working with someone, that meant, in my case, which the Ministry of Interior should have clarified to the High Court, is that Miss Ritchie, that being me, was simply receiving facilitation, clearances, and security when needed when she was working on projects on her own. I have never been a paid employee of any government institution outside of the United States of America. That's the end of that.
You heard what she said. That's the end of that.
Shutdown initiated.
But all of the legal action, the deportation, the rumors about her, it's all just smoke and mirrors. It's all just an effort to distract from the issue. Let her explain it to you.
I know that people want to create this unnecessary controversy around me. They want to try to deport me so that my story won't actually be told. Listen, if I were actually up to criminal issues, if I had falsely accused someone of these heinous things that we've been talking about, then it seems to me that someone who is genuinely wronged would say, we don't want her to go anywhere. We want her to stay here and go to court.
Ritchie claims that rape culture is pervasive in Pakistan. Pervasive. That's her word. During that time that I told you about, when the court ordered her not to make any negative statements, one of the things that she said in a DW interview is that MPs, including Ramin Malik, seemed fascinated with rape culture, and even more so the idea of a woman in authority ordering the rapes of other women. And if you think she was bold in the face of that gag order to say something like that, you should hear how she feels now about her pursuit for justice.
Look, we are doing the best that we can to try to get justice here in Pakistan. I love Pakistan. I love the people here. But this is a corrupt system. I'm not going anywhere. I am not going to allow PPP to continue to threaten me. I'm not going to allow them to interfere with my ability to voice my concerns.
She's not going anywhere. And she's not going to allow PPP to intimidate her. But that's not it.
Individuals here think they can get away with lying, not telling the truth, and not accepting accountability for their actions. If we can't get justice here, I promise you, I will take all of this and more to the United States of America.
That's a promise, she said. And you've already heard that Ritchie is used to getting her paperwork, her clearances, whatever she needs to do her work to tell her stories. So the Interior Ministry, they need to stop playing with her and get with the program.
Ministry of Interior, I encourage you to do your job and to do so swiftly. I have applied for my visa a long time ago with valid credentials and references. You know it, and I know it. And we will be looking forward to hearing from you all soon. I expect that the government departments do their job fairly and objectively and not allow people like those involved in certain political parties to unduly influence the investigation, because I promise you this is being watched globally, and I will continue to update the international community in terms of how I'm being treated as an American in Pakistan.
Another promise. Okay? And not only is Richie prepared to crank up the flames on Pakistan, if the U.S. tries to play her this time, she's got flames for them too. Listen.
And if I can't get the adequate cooperation that I need from the U.S. Embassy, or from the judicial system, or from the legal system here, I will see this and I will raise it to the next level. And that's the end of that. I hope everybody has a great week.
Shutdown initiated.
And that's the end of that. Remember when she said people had an elitist attitude, like early on in her days in Pakistan, when they would ask her who she is? It sounds like now she's telling them that they really don't want to know who she is. I mean, wow. Richie has a large following, no doubt. She has about 351,000 followers on Facebook, somewhere around 300,000 on Twitter. Plus, she has the international community watching, apparently. And she clearly has some connections in Pakistan, too. If you check her Facebook posts, there are people on there that are cheering her on. They're telling her to go get them and to bring the bastards to justice and yada yada. Now, if you follow my work other places, like on the No Good Words website or social media accounts, you'll know that I am one who says that writers, content creators, we cannot be cowards. But even with that, I don't think I would go as hard as this chick. I mean, she is going super hard. She is truly practicing what she preaches when she said she was raped, but she's not a victim. At least I wouldn't go hard in the same way that she's going hard. I would make a lot of noise. I would talk hella shit. I would pull every string and use every connection that I had if I had been raped and abused. I understand her on that. But I would do all of that when my feet were back on U.S. soil. You feel me?
Please report any unattended baggage to any airport employee, law enforcement officer, or TSA representative.
It takes a lot of guts to threaten everybody. And you're an American in Pakistan. There are a lot of people, not only in Pakistan, but throughout the world, that will want to see harm come to her precisely because they find that type of attitude cocky and arrogant. And they detest Americans just for that reason. She's talked about the corruption. She's talked about the pervasive rape culture. She said that even though the PPP is no longer in power, that they wield this immense influence over the police and the judicial system, and it prevented her from moving her case forward. It seems somewhere along the way that would be concerning to most people, and they would be slightly uncomfortable about the approach that she's taking. But apparently not. I mean, she said at one point after she was raped that she was scared to go to the U.S. Embassy, but she said she wasn't really terrified. She's never really been terrified, actually, because she's, quote, not wired, end quote, to be terrified. And she's determined to stay in Pakistan. So all I can say is she definitely, if I had to put in a vote, she definitely gets a medal for bravery. I mean, just hands down, she has my vote. As far as her legal issues, as far as justice for the rape and abuse, we'll have to follow and see where all of this goes. So if y'all haven't already, go follow No Good Words magazine on Flipboard, because as news comes out about this and other topics that we cover on this podcast, they'll be included there. And of course, you want to be in the know. While we're in the Middle East, there's another story we have to cover. There's a blogger named Mohammed al-Bukhari who is sitting in prison in Saudi Arabia for a social media post. And that's just part of the problem he has to face in the months ahead. This is a ridiculous story, y'all. But that's why we need to cover it. Because we have to not only raise awareness about issues like this, but we need to keep the world aware.
Let's go.
So in April, the Saudi Arabia security forces arrested al-Bukhari, who is from Yemen. They beat him and verbally abused him, allegedly trying to get him to confess he's gay. In a police statement, the authorities reportedly claimed that a video he uploaded to Twitter contained, quote, sexual references and, quote, violates public order and morals, end quote. So he was charged with violating public morality by promoting homosexuality online and a law of imitating women. Now, me nor the executive producer here speaks that language, so we couldn't personally confirm what he said, but according to Human Rights Watch, NBC News, and other sources, the statement that got him in trouble was this.
Better get ready.
Quote, everyone has rights and should be able to practice them freely, including gay people, end quote.
What?
That's it. He didn't do anything vulgar that I can see. He's not acting in a way that's sexual or suggestive that I can tell from the video. And he didn't even initiate the conversation. He was responding to a question someone posed online. Before the trial, al-Bukhari spent 6 weeks in solitary confinement. According to reports, he had no windows, no air conditioning, and insufficient ventilation. And this guy reportedly has a chronic heart condition. He tried to get medication, but the doctors wouldn't provide it to him. So, over the months that he's locked up, waiting for trial, according to people that's close to him, his health is deteriorating. This man is only 29 years old. So on July 20th, he's finally sentenced without access to a lawyer. He received 10 months in prison and got a fine of 10,000 riyal, which is about $2,700. And that's not all. After he gets out of prison, he'll be deported back to Yemen. Now, Human Rights Watch said it obtained recorded phone conversations and messages via social media where there were Yemeni armed groups and private individuals who threatened to kill al-Bukhari. And that's why he left Yemen in the first place. So he's been living in Saudi Arabia without documentation since 2019. If he's sent back to Yemen, according to Human Rights Watch, he faces the possibility of being in a life-threatening situation.
This is not
For Saudi Arabia to deport him under those circumstances would generally violate international law. But that appears to be the plan at this point. And if those details aren't extreme enough, there's more. While al-Bakari was in custody, in an effort to prove that he's gay, security officers forced him to endure an anal exam, a source told Human Rights Watch.
No way.
Yep, you heard me correctly. Now, I'm going to go on a limb and say that these security forces were men. And since they seemed obsessed with determining whether al-Bakari was gay so that they could prosecute him on something, I'm going to assume that they at least portray themselves as straight. What type of straight men team up to check another man's ass for homosexual activity? I mean, how do you know what to look for? And how do you report your findings? Do you sit and write a report to your superior officer, meaning like you create a legal document outlining the methods you used and what your observations were that led to your conclusion? That's straight up bizarre shit. And I don't care how it was done. In my book, that's just sexual assault. As a matter of fact, depending on the procedure, it may have been rape. There is no way that that could ever be justifiable. And what makes it all worse is that in Saudi Arabia, there aren't any laws regulating like sexual orientation or gender identity. This is just a case where authorities stretch some other laws to fit their agenda. But this case isn't rare or isolated. Al Monitor issued this warning, and I quote, "Saudi Arabia remains a dangerous place for LGBT individuals. Although the conservative Muslim country has no explicit laws covering sexual orientation or gender identity, judges turn to Islamic law to prescribe punishments for homosexual sex and other immoral acts." End of quote. And according to Human Rights Watch, in Saudi Arabia, these so-called immoral acts include things like having sex outside of marriage and having extramarital affairs. That's why for me, any offer to visit a place like Saudi Arabia is a hell no. To voluntarily go to a place where imitating women lands you in prison, where men prod in other men's asses to determine their sexuality, hell no. Whatever cultural sites or history or other points of interest they have in places like Saudi Arabia, I'll have to see those on National Geographic or the History Channel or Instagram or something, because I am not going. But it's important for us to cover stories like al-Bakari and even like Richie for several reasons. For starters, like I said, we need to shine light on what's happening to people. And hopefully it will bring change and justice. And meanwhile, it'll keep our fellow creators safer. But another thing is that before COVID-19, the world had gotten a lot smaller for content creators. A lot of people were traveling. Many of us were going to more remote and sometimes risky places. So we need to keep an eye on our global community so we'll know before we go. You feel me? I don't tell you what to think, but I will tell you what to think about. Oh, before I roll out, if you want to see the al-Bakari video, the Human Rights Watch story is in the No Good Words Flipboard magazine, and there's a link in that post to his post. All right, until next time, stay safe, y'all.